Welcome to Lesson 4, Working with Subject Categories. In this lesson you will learn how to define a new classification and its categories, how to assign a category to a term or a group of terms, and how to generate reports with classifications. Categories are a means of grouping subsets of terms within a thesaurus or taxonomy. While a category could be a top-down grouping in a hierarchy or as a facet, it doesn't have to be. Categories are assigned to terms as metadata, so are independent of hierarchical classification. When you create a thesaurus or taxonomy in MultiTes, the system provides a default classification or category to use. We can see this under the relationship wizard. This is what's called subject category with the abbreviation SC. There are no categories in it. You would have to create them. So this is a classification that you may use or you may ignore. Categories serve various purposes, so in addition to individual categories, you can designate groups of categories which are called classifications. We're going to create a new classification for time zone, which we will associate to the terms in this geographic locations thesaurus. The first step is to define the new classification or category type. Although categories technically are not relationships, they are managed along with relationships in MultiTes. So we go to the Define menu and select Relationships. Not yet categories, but relationships. Here's the list what's available and what we've added before. Click the button New to create a new kind of relationship. Remember, before we had selected equivalents when we created the abbreviations. Now we're going to select category. Notice that those other two boxes disappeared because those were for reciprocal relationships, and a category is not really a relationship and does not have any reciprocal. So now we're going to designate the relationship code and description. So for time zone it will be TZ and spelled out time zone. And then hit enter to save. Now you see that the new type of category or classification has been added to the list. The next step is to create the individual categories within the classification. In this case, the names of the individual time zones, each with a code and description. So back again to the Define menu, now we select categories or the shortcut Alt-C. And this box Manage Categories appears. Under classification, we have two types now, the original default subject categories and now time zone. Neither of them have any categories within them. So that's what we're going to do now. Going down to the bottom, select New to add a new category. This box appears and now we can add, again, each one requires both a code and a description. So the time zones of the continental United States, EST for Eastern Standard Time. Hit enter to save by default. And down there the new button is now highlighted. So again, if I just hit enter by default, the box will appear again. So now Central Standard Time. Hit enter. Enter again. MST Mountain Standard Time. Enter, and PST. All right, now we have all the time zones we want, and then we don't have them associated to terms. That's the next step. Let's close this for a moment though. As I said, we've designated our classification time zone, and we've designated categories within it, and so the final step is to associate those time zones with terms. We could have done that in the Manage Categories box when we were there, but if you've closed it, as I did, you can go back very quickly by clicking on the Manage Categories button up at the top. Under Classification, select the classification you want, and you can see that it does have those 4 categories we just created. Now we're going to associate them with terms. Go down to the bottom to click Add. Oh yes, I need to select a category first. So to central time zone, and it calls up the advanced search box because it associates the categories only to terms existing within the thesaurus or taxonomy, so it needs to search for them. So let's see, if I type in TE for Texas, select, maybe I want to add one more, starts with KA for Kansas, select, and I could do that again for each one of these. Perhaps you've noticed down here is the Add Group button to add multiple terms to a selected category. That would save time. It calls up this box, the Add Multiple Terms to Category, which is a little bit like the quick data entry screen because we can just type in terms one by one, or we can add them, copying them from a clipboard, and I've already done that work. I've compiled a list here. This is the central time zone states. I copy from the notepad and paste into the box, click save, give it a minute. Now Kansas and Texas were already there. It doesn't matter, it overwrites and I'd get no error message. Let's see, go back to Eastern. We need to add the states of that belong. Okay, add group again, and paste, save, give it a minute or just a few seconds. Great, now Mountain Time Zone, add group. I copy, paste, save, in a second those appear, and then finally Pacific Time, add group. All right, we are done. And the refresh list will show us that these categories have been added. Some states have been assigned too because the state crosses over more than one time zone. So we have added from the managed categories the category to terms. You can go in the other direction as well and start with the term and add categories to that, especially if it's going to have multiple categories. Let's do that with the United States and assign all categories to it. Remember, categories are managed like relationships, so you can use the Add Relationships button and the time zones there, or the Relationship Wizard. We'll go on with this one. And I will select each one at a time, save, add time zone, another one that was Eastern, click, Mountain, save, add time zone, Pacific, save. There, all four have been added, and now we see that indeed all four time zones have been added to the classification of the United States. There are various ways that you can look at the list of classifications and what terms belong to them. We can do that right here in the term record. If I click on one of these, we get the list. It brings us by default to advanced search, so we see all the states that have the central time zone category assigned to them. We can also go to Manage Categories, select the classification time zone, select one of the categories, and we see the list. We can go directly to Advanced Search, and from the drop-down of the type of search, we want to have those that belong to a category. You need to click Pick, then of course select the type of classification first, then the category, and then the button Find. This takes a little more time, and you get the list of terms that belong to that category. Okay, so we have created a new classification, created categories within them, and assigned them to terms. So, and we've looked at different ways we can view them, but what's particularly interesting is being able to generate different reports using the category feature. So up at Reports, under Report Generator, you'll see that there is an option Select by Categories. You can select terms that must belong to at least one, belong to all, not belong to any. click the INS, that stands for Insert, to select the category. Remember, you always have to select the classification first and then select the category. And then if I just simply print to screen, I get a list of all the states that belong to the Central Time Zone category. How about if I want those that belong to Central Time Zone but do not belong to Eastern? Some are split over 2 time zones. You see, it's a slightly shorter list. I don't have to scroll. This select by categories is also an option in the top term report, not merely from Report Generator. You can also, under Reports, perhaps you've seen this, Subject Categories. What does that mean? That gives you a report of the categories within a classification. So the time zone one, and I click Print Report, I get a report of those categories. Now this is a very short report, but you can imagine if you created a different kind of classification, you might have a very long list of categories, and this report could be useful. Finally, under Reports, you might have noticed Classified. That's particularly useful and interesting because that's where you can generate a report where the terms are grouped by their category. So let's do this. We again, time zone, and there we have it. We have all the terms grouped by their time zone category. Now if we check this box, print terms in a top-down hierarchical format, the difference is the United States isn't listed alphabetically in the list, but is indicated as the broader term for the states under it. So that's about it for categories, and this is the end of Lesson 4.